Coming up on the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast, we discuss the must-have defenses, the defenses with the best playoff schedules that will help you win your fantasy championship. Tune in to find out if you should sit some of your studs and which defenses you should pick up starting right now on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. And don't adjust your monitors, folks. It is the man. By the way, I got to admit, I did talk a little shit. I was like, listen, Derek at this point is not just showing up. I was pissed. I was reacting to you not being around. So
you are hurt.
Yeah. Hurt people, Derek. And I was a little hurt that you didn't show up a few weeks. So listen, but I'm glad you're back. I feel like I'm back home on Wednesday evening. Go follow him at Derek_Favin on Twitter. Derek, what's going on, man?
Doing well. Yeah, I was just seems like it's been forever since we've been on here on a Wednesday night. It's only been a couple weeks, but glad to be back. Playoffs right around the corner, and we're going to dive right into it tonight.
Yeah. So honestly, today's show, we're going to be breaking down the must-have defenses for fantasy football playoffs. Now, listen, most of us still play. I might be in the minority. I like defenses and kicker. I like position diversity a little bit. You can only start so many wide receivers and running backs until you start starting guys that are just not good. So I've always been the guy that I like my defenses and kickers, and they are going to matter. Honestly, I know people sometimes hate it, but there's kickers and defense that might score you 15, 16 points, and that gets you over the edge into your fantasy championship. So today, the exciting thing is the bad defenses, when I was doing my research, actually have good matchups, and the good defenses actually don't have the best matchups in a lot of cases. So this is going to be a fun exercise today, breaking down the must-have defenses for your fantasy football playoff push. Before we dive into that, Derek, kind of what is your overall philosophy going into the fantasy playoffs? Are you a start your stud defense? Do you usually pick up multiple defenses? What's your philosophy for defenses in the playoffs?
Yeah, for me, I normally don't have a stud defense for the whole season. Just the way I roll. I don't really put a lot of draft capital into defenses. I do like to stream. For the most part, I like to stream. So that being said, I'm usually not in a position that I have a defense that I can ride throughout the playoffs and feel really comfortable for. So I do look to have two and go with matchups. And I start looking at those, ironically, right around this time. I start looking at those matchups and plan ahead to see which defenses I want and when I want to use them, just so I'm ready and I'm not fighting everyone else who's looking, the week before. I want to do that like 4 weeks before.
So just quickly to kind of touch on some of the elite defenses. So we're talking about the Vikings, Chiefs, Broncos, defenses that are essentially owned in well over 50% of leagues. I guess so one of the things that I will say is this: it's preferable to play a good defense in a average matchup, a winnable matchup, than trying to justify starting a Jags defense against a really bad offense. So there is going to be a little bit of finding that sweet spot to understand, okay, which defenses have shown enough that you are excited to play them. And some of them we'll talk about on today's show, that these aren't going to be like the bottom of the barrel defenses per se. They are defenses that have flash in moments. So some of the teams I want to talk about really quick, like I know you kind of already said, you're not interested in maybe, but like the 49ers, the Eagles, the Chargers, these defenses that actually have played really well. Is there any that stood out to you when you were doing your research that you're like, all right, I'm definitely going to play that defense this week. I'm hanging on to them no matter what. Is there any of the stud defenses that you felt that way about?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the Chiefs a minute ago, and they're a defense that I'm going to want to circle around if I have them or I can get them, because they've got some good matchups. They don't have a great matchup in Week 17 at the Steelers, but they've had a really good defense against the run. And so when for instance, their Week 15 matchup is at Cleveland. Cleveland, we know that Jameson will throw the ball around, but it's going to be to beat the Browns and keep them in check, you want to make sure you can stop the run. And the Chiefs are really good at stopping the run. So that's a matchup specifically that I'm going to look for. If I have someone like Philadelphia or like you mentioned, the 49ers, I mean, granted, they don't have great matchups, but at least if you can't find a 1 week defense to use, then you're going to use them and you're going to take what you get. I mean, you're not going to feel like you're going to win because of the defense, but they shouldn't cost you. If you do have one of the elite defenses, you're going to roll with it, and that's going to be your default. But if you can find a 1 week defense somewhere else that you can mix in and just take advantage of that really good matchup, like the Falcons, for instance, they're one that kind of stands out a little bit to me. You want to plug them in and just have an option. Don't just hamstring yourself or handcuff yourself the fact that you have one defense and that's all you have.
So I just want to put on the screen, if you watch this later, I just wanted to roll. Like, these are some of the offenses that I think you should kind of attack. And so, like, the Giants, the Patriots are kind of one of those teams where Drake May is kind of a wild card. To be honest with you, it looks like Drake May might be a home road split guy. And if you check out the tool on Razzball, he seems to play better at home, but on the road, he does struggle a little bit more. And then you got teams like the Jags where they're going to get Trevor Lawrence back, and they do have a lot of weapons, so that could always be risky. The Titans are an explosive offense, but they are turnover prone with Will Levis. The Cowboys have been oddly efficient. They're very conservative with Cooper Rush, it seems like. So it might be not the best matchup. You might be relying more on points in that specific matchup. Then you have like the Jets. Aaron Rodgers just really hasn't clicked. And then the Colts with Anthony Richardson. Listen, Jonathan Taylor might be the least talked about bust I've ever heard in my life. Jonathan Taylor is the biggest bust in fantasy football right now. Like, he might be, and it's not even close. He is horrible. He's scoring like 3 fantasy points last week. Not like I have him in any leagues, but it's okay. But anyway, my point is, when you're looking at these matchups, Derek, is there one that kind of stands out to where you're like, I'm targeting that matchup the most? Is there an offense that stands out to you?
An offense that I want my defense to go against is what you're saying.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, I mean, that's really going to be, obviously the Jaguars. I mean, the Jaguars are statistically the worst defense out there, but their playoff schedule is not it's not prone. Like you said, you mentioned Tennessee. Tennessee is kind of a wild card. They do the Tennessee Titans play the Jaguars in week 17. So that would be a matchup potentially where I would want to exploit that, with an offense, with my offensive players. But again, you'd mentioned at the top of the show, some of the best strength of schedules for defenses are all in the bottom third of the league for the most part. So it's going to be really hard to kind of mix and match. It's going to be take a little more strategy than normal to really find the optimal defensive lineups to take into the playoffs.
I think the Giants are one of those teams where, as it pains me to say it, but like, I know there's a little bit of a hesitation, and the good thing is we were kind of talking about the Cowboys defense on Thursday against the Giants. It is a little, they do have a lot of talent, right? And so, like, the issue now is the offensive line is an issue, and the quarterback's getting a lot of sacks. And so, like, it does seem like if they do get any time, they got Neighbors and Slayton and Wandell, and they got Tyrone Tracy. And, like, I know it's Tommy DeVito and Drew Lock probably on Thursday, but, like, you didn't mention the Giants. Is the Giants not a matchup you're really trying to exploit?
It is. I'm looking at their playoff schedule. I mean, they've got Baltimore in week 15. I mean, Baltimore is going to be rostered in a defense, so that's not going to be an option unless you have Baltimore. But Atlanta, I'm kind of looking at Atlanta. in Week 16, hosting the Giants. That would be a matchup that I would like to take advantage of. In fact, Atlanta is one of the teams that I would really kind of circle as a potential wild card defense as a streamer. I mean, they're ranked in the bottom third. Again, they're not a great defense, but their matchups against the Raiders and the Giants, frankly, make them somewhat appealing. So, yeah. So the Raiders, the Giants, Cleveland, Tennessee, those are some of the offenses I'm looking to try to exploit.
I will say this. There wasn't one defense when I was looking at this situation where I felt comfortable. I would start them all 3 weeks. So I'm going to just lead the whole entire conversation by saying that all my recommendations are going to be you pick up 2 defenses. At this point in the year, if you have once you get through week 14, there is no more buys. And you're probably going to be starting, let's say an example, if you're in a shallow league with like 5 bench spots, you're probably not going to be starting the wide receiver 5 on your team. That's a spot where you flip to a defense and then you pair up for the playoffs. Yeah. Once you get through the bye weeks, it's important to have your high-end handcuffs. But to be honest with you, you're pretty much, unless you feel like you have let's say you have a 3 receiver and then you might be rotating 2 guys at your 3-4 spot, that's fine. But going beyond that, to be honest with you, once you get through the bye next week, this is the time where you're like, okay, let's figure out the optimal playoff schedule for the defense, because I'm telling you, it will make a difference. And so you brought up the Falcons, and I will admit there's a couple of teams that I like. The Falcons were one of them. The Colts might be the one defense where, honestly, like the Colts DST is good. They're getting healthy, and they've looked good the last few weeks, and they have some really good matchups outside of the Broncos game. And so my number one duo I actually have on my list is the Falcons-Colts. Pairing the Falcons in week 15 against the Raiders. Then you have the option of doing either the Colts or Falcons in week 16. And then you finish with the Giants. So you basically get the Giants twice and the Raiders once. And that one was a really good duo. And the other one I had up there too is the Cardinals-Colts, where you Cardinals versus the Patriots. They are going to be home, so New England will be in Arizona, which I like. Then you have the Colts, or you have the Cardinals versus the Panthers, which I don't know. The Panthers are starting to look pretty good over the last few weeks. But you have the Colts versus the Titans, and then the Colts once again against the Giants. So those are like the 2 biggest ones that I've identified. Is there a pairing that you really like?
Yeah, I like the Cardinals as well. That was one that I'm pairing with either Buffalo, if I could get the Bills. Again, that's another one that's probably going to be owned. But outside of their Week 15 matchup at Detroit, they've got a really good schedule. But then one that I don't hear mentioned, we haven't mentioned it yet, is the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers, statistically, they're one of the worst defenses, but they've got a tremendous schedule in week 16 weeks. So at Dallas and then home for Carolina. Like you said, Dallas has been efficient, but they're not going to blow you out, this anymore. Same with Carolina. Carolina's starting to show some life and efficient, but again, that's not an offense that you expect to blow you out. And what's more important, I think, is we can expect at least through week 17, the Bucs are right in the thick of it. They're going to be playing for their playoff life. And what motivates a team, in week 16, especially week 17, is what are they playing for? We might have one of the better, defenses or better teams in even offensive players, but you get to week 17 and they're either out of it completely or they're just not really playing for anything. And, does that affect how they approach the game, even though they have a great matchup? I think it does to some degree. So even if they're, for instance, like the Bucs are not ranked very high at all. I played them last week, in the match last week in one of my leagues, and they worked out really well because they're
the Giants.
Right. And that's what you're saying, taking advantage of some of those nice matchups, even though the defense, statistically one of the worst, but you can plug them in a 1 week scenario like that against the Giants, and it works out just fine. So yeah, the Bucks are another one I'm looking at if I need like a 1 week filler in there, and especially they're not going to be rostered beforehand. So if you have that shallow bench and you get to week 14 after the buys, week 15, and you want a streaming defense for that fifth wide receiver, look at the Buccaneers. That might be one, just a sneaky ad that might pay off.
Yeah, the Chargers is the one game where you're a little bit concerned. And then the Cowboys, are they in? Let's see. They're at Dallas. That's
At
a little.
Dallas, yeah.
I think Cooper Rush plays. I personally, from what I've seen, Cooper Rush seems to play a little bit better at home. And the Cowboys always historically have played better at home, but their defense has been bad over the last few weeks at home.
Yeah.
So we'll see. And then the Panthers, I don't know what to make of what the hell's going on in Carolina, but they have looked impressive. I mean, they played the Chiefs very well. And so by the way, this is all we're talking about in the moment right now, what we've kind of learned over the last few weeks. But the Panthers are one of those teams where if the trend continues, I might not want to touch that one. But so just like another deeper name that I looked at was the Bengals. The Bengals DST, when you're watching them, they play to their opponent. Like if you watch the defense, if you look at their stats, they have good games against bad teams, and then they get smoked by good offenses. And to be honest with you, I'm never going to play the Bengals against a good offense. So when you're looking at their schedule, Titans and Browns, the first 2 weeks of the playoffs, listen, you have Callahan, who's a former Bengals staffer. So it's kind of a similar offense. Maybe Lou Amarulo kind of knows what they're doing a little bit, can help the defense to an extent, but that could also be flipped on the other end. And then the Browns are a lot of the stats for the Browns are skewed because Deshaun Watson was a dumpster fire. And then Jameis is very volatile. But the one thing you'll get with Jameis is some turnovers here and there. You'll get a couple sacks here and there, but he might get points and yards. So a lot of this discussion is understanding what your league format is. Is your league format, give up, you lose fantasy points for yardage is a key one. Because then guys like Jameis Winston, who will just throw for 300 yards, is going to be a bad thing for your defense. But a lot of leagues now are either point focused and turnover focused. So that's a better option there. So the Bengals are a deeper name. But before we kind of go, is there a specific duo? What if you were to pick right now, and I'll tell you, give me the perfect playoff duo defenses and which weeks you're starting them against those opponents.
Yeah, that's going to be tough because there's not going to really be a perfect, Minnesota, you love them against the Bears in week 15. But again, you're probably not going to have them. So I mentioned before the Bills and the Cardinals. So I would play the Cardinals at home versus New England in week 15, then the Bills at home in week 16, and then week 17 at home versus the Jets. So I would pair the Cardinals and the Bills. That would be my number one target if in a perfect world, Cardinals and Bills.
I actually am going to say something. I'm going to say Falcons Colts.
Interesting.
Falcons against the Raiders. Then you got Falcons versus the Giants or Colts versus the Titans. And then in week 17, you got Colts versus the Giants.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at Indianapolis, the only downside, I like Indy a lot this week. The only hesitation I have is if you look at Indy's schedule, their defense has played a lot better at home. And they're in New England this week. They'll be in New York on week 17. But the Colts are one of those teams where they're fighting for a playoff spot. You just talked about that too. But early season, we talked about this on Sunday. They had so many defensive line injuries. Their cornerbacks were banged up. And so they're getting healthy at the right time. That being said, this is almost a showcase week for me. I kind of want to see how they do in New England on the road against a rookie quarterback to see if they could actually play up to snuff on the road. And then I'm going to feel really confident that they can Because what I really want is a team that creates turnovers and pass rush. Like I need a team because when you face the Giants, they're gonna have a turnstile, and that's what I really want. So the Falcons Giants game, the Falcons aren't really known for their pass rush, so I'm always concerned there. But I have the flexibility. If the Colts get hot, I could play the Colts against the Titans in Week 16 instead. So that's kind of why I really like that duo. Another team we haven't really talked about that's a little less owned is the Dolphins.
Yeah.
Miami's got Cleveland in Week 17, and then they have Houston and San Francisco, which isn't really ideal. But Miami pairing up a Falcons with the Dolphins isn't bad either. If you have Miami, and I believe Miami is they're in Cleveland, so that game could be cold, winter. Like you could leverage the shitty weather against the defense. So that's another one that kind of popped up. But that's any final thoughts, Derek?
Yeah, I think just listen to both of us talk. Whether it's the Falcons or the Cardinals in Week 15 and Week 16 are defenses that are probably available and certainly give you some flexibility. And it's just one last one. We haven't really talked about the Lions. I mean, Lions are known to be very friendly for passing offenses, but they've got the Bears in Chicago Week 16. And that's one as well that their playoff matchup on either side. Buffalo and San Francisco aren't great, but circle that Week 16 as well with the Lions, and before. They're going to be playing for the number one spot, for the playoffs, so home field advantage. So I could see Week 16 at Chicago. It might be another one that. You might be able to get someone dropping the Lions for a streaming defense, and you could take advantage of that 1 week matchup.
So let's talk about this really quick, because there was when I looked online, there was 11 defenses that are owned in 50% of leagues. So I tried to exclude them from this analysis, but let's just quickly. This might be a good topic to talk about. So the Vikings, Broncos, Chiefs, Steelers, 49ers, Lions, Bills, Texans, Bears, Eagles, and Chargers. Now, I just ran through that list really quick. Are the teams that are owned in most leagues, over 50%. So let's ask the question. Let's quickly go through the schedules and ask, would we play them in that matchup? Because I think that would be important. Yeah. So let's dive into the first one, which is the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings have Chicago, which you already gave the thumbs up to. But then they have Seattle, which is always an interesting game. Yeah. And that's in Seattle. And then they also have the Packers, which I don't think either of us are excited about. So the question is, Minnesota, would you bother holding on to them during the playoff stretch? Or are you taking Week 15 and then you're pairing with somebody else?
Yeah, I'm definitely holding them. I'm certainly going to play them in Week 15 if I've got that first round matchup in the playoffs. But I'm looking for a team, like I said, we talked about some like the Colts or some others who gives me some flexibility in Week 16. I'll play Minnesota at Seattle. I don't love it. But like you said, if I can find a really good matchup in Week 17, instead of taking them versus the Packers, I would like to do that. But yeah, I'm definitely going to hold them.
Yeah, I think I'm out. I think I'm not interested in starting. The Bears offense has looked good in the new offensive scheme. And they're home against Chicago, at Seattle, home against Green Bay. I don't think it's worth it to me to keep them. Let's jump over to the Denver Broncos. They have the Colts, Chargers, Bengals. This one seems tough. Now, the Broncos defense is legit. I think the Colts game I'd feel okay with. I'm not overly scared about that team. But the Chargers and Bengals, I don't think so. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not loving either one of those, especially that Week 17 at Cincinnati. Cincinnati, they're on the outside looking in, but if there's a team out there that can make a run in these final weeks to get at least contending for a playoff spot in the last weeks, it's the Bengals. And yeah, well, I don't want to take my defense into Cincinnati in Week 17 and expect really good numbers. Put my championship title hopes on the Broncos in Cincinnati Week 17. Yeah, I'm out on that one for sure.
Yeah, I would say if you have the Broncos, I would take them for week 15, and then I would pair them with the
Yep.
Colts. That's
Yep.
what I'd probably do. And then I'm insert the same response here. You have the Kansas City Chiefs. They have the Browns in week 15, then Houston and Pittsburgh. Now, the Houston game is at home, but I don't really want to play around with CJ Stroud and company, even in the cold months. I don't hate it, but I don't love it. So I would probably say same thing. Start them against the Browns,
Yep.
probably fill in with the Colts or another defense like that.
Yeah, and we can say the same thing for the Ravens as well. The Ravens have a very similar situation. At the Giants in 15, and then home for Pittsburgh, and then at Houston in 17. The Ravens are another one that's probably that's highly owned, and one that you don't want to just put your title hopes in one defense.
Yeah, Steelers are another defense where I don't think I'm going to keep them. I honestly am dropping them right now and letting somebody else. They have Philly, Ravens, Chiefs. That's not a good defense. I have not played the Steelers with that schedule. So if you have the Steelers,
first two on the road too. Yeah.
Yeah, no thanks there. 49ers, we have San Francisco. They have the Rams, Dolphins, and then Detroit. And then that is at Miami, which no thank you, but they're home against Detroit and the Rams. Honestly, this is another one where I'm not interested. Your thoughts?
Agree. The Rams always play the Niners tough. It does. Those divisional games are always tough. Traveling cross country to Miami, no thanks. And then of course Detroit. We talked about Detroit. Pushing for the home field. For the playoffs in week 17, no thanks.
So Detroit has Buffalo, and they are home against Buffalo. That worries me. I think that could be a track meet. I'm not interested in that one. Then you have the Bears and then 49ers. I know San Francisco is struggling, but to be honest with you, by then, I don't know. With Purdy, I don't think I'm starting them even against the Bears. What's your thoughts here?
Yeah, I'd mentioned before, kind of circled that week 16 against the Bears. But other than that, I really don't want the Lions defense. I don't know. We might find that you kind of alluded to San Francisco. Are they trending down? With Purdy's injury, and if they're out of the playoffs, or by week 17, if they're really not in it anymore. They're probably going to sit McCaffrey to risk, another injury, let him be healthy in the off season. Maybe Purdy's on the shelf. Maybe you do want to face San Francisco in week 17. So right now I'd say no, but I could see that situation going downhill for the 49ers. And, that might be something that you'd want to take advantage of, maybe a few weeks from now. Let's see what the next few weeks bring for the Niners.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a fair response. I think if you are the Lions owner, you definitely need a contingency for week 15 at least.
Yes.
So, obviously like the Ravens make a ton of sense there. We talked a little bit about the Cardinals, the Falcons. Like if you have the Lions DST, get one of those other defenses so you could start them in week 15.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to go out in the first round of your playoffs, because you stuck with your Lions defense against Buffalo.
Yeah. Same with the Bills. The Bills, honestly, you just find, I think we can insert the same response. I think the same thing we just said for the Lions, do the same thing for the Bills. You find an alternative for their game in week 15 on the road against Detroit, but then they have the Patriots and the Jets, which I think are both winnable matchups for the Bills.
Yeah.
Let's jump down to Houston. Houston is another widely owned defense that's a little bit matchup dependent, but they do have a lot of good matchups. They have the Dolphins, Chiefs, and Ravens. I could say for sure you could drop them. It's okay. Yes. I mean, they're okay to play. I think they have Jacksonville this week, which is not terrible for Houston. But if you already locked up a playoff spot, go get those other defenses.
Yeah. And I think we just have to acknowledge, for all of us, this is scary to do. You think about it, you go all year, you count on a defense like, Houston or Pittsburgh, some of these defenses we're talking about, and then we're telling you drop them for the playoffs. They got you here, and now you're saying drop them, and you're streaming defenses where if everyone's got ranks, and you look at the ranks in some of these defenses, you're dropping a top 5 or 6 defense for a 22nd ranked defense. That's a scary proposition to do in the playoffs, but that's hard to do. And I think we should at least acknowledge that. But, it's the right call. I mean, in many cases, it's the right call to do.
Yeah, let's get into the Bears. The Bears have the Vikings, Lions, and then Seattle. They do have the Seattle Seahawks at home. I know it's road golf, and they do have it in Chicago, which is nice. Just seems a little too risky for my blood, especially at Minnesota as well. Honestly, I don't think I'd feel comfortable really starting the Bears. Maybe week 17 against Seattle at home, but I don't know if I'm rolling the dice against the Detroit because they can run the football.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's another wait and see for week 17 versus Seattle. That might be one where they might be available on the wire, and you can plug them in at the week 15 or week 16. You can plug them in and hold them just in case Seattle falls out of it, and they're not really playing for much in week 17. That might be a situation I might go for, but other than that, yeah, I'm probably staying away.
Let's do 2 more. We have the Eagles. They have the Steelers, Commanders, Dallas. I don't know. I know the Eagles defense is playing really well. Pittsburgh, I don't know. I think people might have figured out the Russell Wilson thing a little bit. He hasn't looked necessarily amazing the last 2 weeks. But he's fine. They're at home against the Steelers. Then they're in Washington, I guess they're in DC against the Commanders, and then they have the Cowboys, and I think they have the Cowboys number personally.
Yeah.
I'm not overly concerned about Cooper Rush, especially at home. So I think there is a world where you could start the Eagles in weeks 15 and 17. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, and this is one of those ones where, again, on paper, it may look like you want to go a different way, but if I have the Eagles, I'm going to probably roll with them. I may give myself an option because, again, there are some just really nice matchups for other teams, but I'm probably going to hang with Philly. I mean, you watch that team, and they can put pressure on the quarterback. I mean, their front four is really generating a lot of push right now and getting to the quarterback and making life miserable. And I mean, we just saw Dallas really put Jaden Daniels, kind of keep him in check. And, Dallas is no Philly. So I feel less concerned if I'm the Philly defense owner going into the playoffs, but I still want to consider, just having some options if necessary.
So it sounds like to me that the Eagles might be the most confident defense heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, to me, from the ones we've talked about, to me, I think they are. They're the ones I would have the most confidence in. But that's just one. That's one out of the 32 that frankly, we feel pretty comfortable, somewhat comfortable going into the playoffs with. Everyone else, you were looking to mix and match.
Yeah. And Frizzle, how you doing? Good to see you. What's up, man? He just brought this up too. By the way, if you haven't catch the beginning of the show, we broke down the Cardinals. Cardinals are one of the teams we're recommending you pick up for the playoff push. They have the Patriots and Panthers the first 2 weeks, which is a really nice beginning to your playoff schedule. We don't necessarily recommend just the Cardinals. If you pick up the Cardinals, you need to pair them with somebody like the Colts, for example, who have the Giants in week 17, which is a much more advantageous matchup. But the Arizona defense is good, and that's the perfect type of defense to pair with another one to get you through the playoffs. The last one I want to talk about is the Chargers. They have the Bucks, the Broncos, and then they finish with the Patriots. Now, the Patriots matchup for the Chargers is at New England.
Yeah.
And then they're home against Tampa and Denver. I mean, this is one where I don't think I'm that confident in that schedule. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I certainly don't love it. In a really deep league and I have the Chargers, then okay, I'm going to roll them out. But there's another one where you want to look to mix and match. We talked, for instance, pairing the Chargers and the Cardinals makes a lot of sense. We just spoke about the Cardinals. That makes a lot of sense. Having some options with the Cardinals in week 15 and 16, and then the Chargers in 17. So I do like them, and if they happen to, owner releases them and they're on the wire, then I'm certainly going to look to add them as my pair. But again, not a defense that I want to go into the playoffs, with them as my only defense.
Yeah, you can't rely on them against the Bucks, and Denver has been really good. It is nice that they're home against Denver because Bo Nix plays a lot better at home versus on the road, so that's good. Being on the East Coast against New England worries me a little bit in Week 17, but at the same time, the Chargers also might be dropped in a lot of leagues. They have a brutal schedule heading into the playoffs. They have at Atlanta, then they have at Kansas City. So I don't recommend playing them against Tampa. But if you could pick up a team like the Cardinals or the Falcons to start maybe the first 2 weeks, and then you finish with the Chargers in Week 17, that makes a little sense. I agree.
Yep.
All right, that's all we got today, folks. This is the playoff must-have streamers for defenses heading into your fantasy football playoffs. Now, Derek, before we close out the show, tell the people what you got upcoming at Razzball and everything they need to know about where to find your content.
Yeah, DFS and prop bets. I might have something, a quick hitter for tomorrow's games. Looking into making a little Turkey Day action, just to make it a little more fun. But certainly look for my weekend DFS and prop bet slate to come out on Friday for the weekend games.
Nice. And make sure you join us. By the way, we will be on Sunday for 2 hours before kickoff. We do our Sunday live start sit show. It's a lot of fun with just the entire Razzball team, just talking football, answering your start sit questions, breaking down key injuries, weather updates, everything you need to know up until kickoff. So a lot of fun. So join us on Sunday live for 2 hours before kickoff on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. Make sure you jump over and check out all the great content on Razzball.com. All these guys are doing great work over there. We also have fantastic tools to help you set your lineups every single week. You have the slot versus wide points per game allowed tool. We also have home versus road splits and wins versus losses. Really, really unique tools to help you decide that final flex wide three spots, and also learn a little bit about, hey, home road splits matter. I'm telling you right now, for some reason, some quarterbacks play really good at home versus the road. Those are really cool things to know when setting your lineups, especially trying to make your playoff push. I want to thank Derek Favre for joining us once again. Go follow him at Derek_Favre on Twitter. And if you have time, please follow me at Bobby Lamarco on Twitter. Thanks for joining us, folks. We are out of here.